The Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was born on January 15, 1929. The Black preacher and systematic theologian, champion of nonviolent resistance, and drum major of the Black Freedom Movement, was murdered on a balcony of the Lorraine Motel in Memphis, Tennessee, on April 4, 1968. Birth dates and death dates are familiar beginning and ending points used to chart the lives of historical figures. Yet our people's history also records that roughly 2 weeks before the assassination of our peaceful warrior, the forces of racism and white supremacy planned to attack Dr. King in the heart of the rural Alabama Black Belt. The Ku Klux Klan was mobilizing to kill him. Nevertheless, on that day, the people, the foot soldiers of Greensboro, Alabama, decided that they were going to transform an ordinary residential home into a safe house and protect the life of an extraordinary leader by any means necessary. I am the Reverend Lukata Mjumbe. I'm the Executive Director of the Alabama African American Civil Rights Heritage Sites Consortium, and welcome to this anniversary episode of the Stayed on Freedom podcast, in defense of our peace. This morning with my mind, stay on freedom. Oh, woke up this morning with my mind, stay on freedom. Oh, woke up this morning with my mind, stay on freedom.
We had been having regular meetings, mass meetings at St. Matthew Church, which is over there. That particular night, we had Reverend Shuttlesworth, T.Y. Rogers, Jose Williams, Albert Turner. You know, Martin was the slowest person. He's slow to speak. He's slow to walk. He's slow to talk. And he was still there talking. So this someone came in the church in such a hurry. And they said, "Is Dr. King here?" And we said, "Yes, he's here." He said, "Don't take him down 14 because the clans are waiting on him."
Teresa Burroughs, a veteran movement activist, and others decided that they would go a different way, that they would travel north and move Dr. King out of Greensboro by an alternate route on Highway 69 North. Local leaders received reports that not only was the Klan waiting on Highway 14, they were also waiting to the north on Highway 69, but they weren't just waiting. They had actually burned St. Mark, a local black church. The exit routes from Greensboro were limited, and the people then decided they would turn south on Highway 69, only to learn that St. Paul Baptist Church was on fire. Flames of hatred were burning in every direction, and the decision was made to move Dr. King into the home of local leader Miss Teresa Burroughs, who lived next door to her mother.
All the churches around was burning. So that's why we brought him here. Every man in the neighborhood, they got to grab their gun, and they surrounded this house. And Martin was in there asleep. He was so tired.
In her oral histories and recounting the events of that night, Miss Burroughs has revealed that local activist Norbert Woods went out into the community and called upon the men of Greensboro to get their guns and come to the Burroughs house, the safe house, to protect the life of their warrior for peace. And Dr. King was ushered into that safe house by the family to be guarded throughout the night by the black community who knew the shadows, knew where to hide.
He didn't even know what was going on outside. The class was still riding and looking.
But they kept Dr. King safe. As she reflected on the largely unknown and unreported history of armed community members standing on post and protection of a paragon of nonviolence and peace, Miss Burroughs goes on to say something which on its face sounds curiously ironic. She says, that was a stupid thing for them to do because they were a target. Now they had guns. But she also says they were nonviolent. King made it safely through the night, and they made plans to head out of Greensboro early the following morning. Dr. King reportedly spoke to the people who had protected his life and cared for him outside of the safe house before he went on to continue his work for the Poor People's Campaign. But that was to come to an end in a very short amount of time. He was never actually able to be a part of the mass mobilization in Washington, D.C. for the Poor People's March. His life was brought to a violent end by an assassin's bullet in Memphis, Tennessee on April 4th, 1968. In honor of a more complete remembrance of the legacy of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., we sat down with activist, historian, and scholar Dr. Akinyele Umoja of the Georgia State University African American Studies History Department for a conversation about the more complicated legacy of nonviolence and self-defense and the Black Freedom Movement. Welcome to this special episode of the Stayed on Freedom podcast. We are here today in Atlanta, Georgia with my brother, my friend, my mentor, activist, and scholar, Dr. Akinyele Umoja, who is the author of We Will Shoot Back, Armed Resistance in the Mississippi Freedom Movement. We are talking with Dr. Umoja today about the complicated legacy of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., of what we saw in Greensboro, Alabama with the Black History Safe House Museum, which occurred in March of 1968, but also within the broader context of the civil rights movement, the Black Freedom Movement, the Black Resistance Movement. Dr. Umoja, Akinyele, AK, thank you for being here with us on today and sharing with us your history, your scholarship, your legacy, and not only where we've been, but where we go from here. Talk to us about this Black Freedom Movement, particularly here in the United States of America.
The terminology I use in my classes is a Black freedom struggle, because I see there are several movements that are part of that go at particular periods of time. But the freedom struggle goes back to the first Africans who were captured on the west coast of Africa and brought here to North America. Of course, they were struggles that happened on the west coast, west and west central Africa, even East Africa. So, because that's one thing we don't talk. We do have some ancestors that come from East Africa. People struggled on those ships. You know, I one of the reasons that I think first they wouldn't chain up the women on the ships because, you know, the slaveholders wanted to sexually abuse them. But then they had to chain them up because they was collaborating with the men, getting the information, to resist. So they had to change that policy. So we fought there. We fought when we got here. The first case I know of enslaved Africans being brought to North America was 1526. In 1526, they were brought to Georgia, first to South Carolina, then to Georgia, a colony the Spanish had called San Miguel de Guadalupe. They fought and resisted. That's why that colony is not there anymore. They aligned themselves with the indigenous folk. Same thing happened.
So it goes back before 1619.
Go before 1619. And even prior to that, bringing them to the island of Hispaniola, they resisted and fought. The Spanish said for a while they didn't want to bring them no more because they were teaching the indigenous people bad habits. The bad habits.
What were the bad habits?
Was us having solidarity and fighting together. So
Wow.
I say it's a long struggle, and it's still going on now. Within that.
And what did the struggle look like? I suspect they weren't doing sit-ins or nonviolent marches.
Well,
back in 1526.
Oh no, that was a struggle that utilized what I call in my title of my book, armed resistance. They used what we would call guerrilla warfare. They aligned themselves with the indigenous population, and then they some of them escaped and they used whatever to harass the Spanish, and Spanish eventually left. But during that period of time of our enslavement, the resistance included guerrilla warfare, including just escaping, because by escaping, you affected their economy. Right. So and then sometimes it took forms that were more like we would call today passive aggressive. They would, so there were a variety of things. I think though,
they might put something in your food.
Put something in your food
to make you sick or worse.
Or they might spit in your food.
Right.
That wouldn't kill them right
you
then.
May never even know.
But it'd be a way for you just to show that, hey, I'm not totally giving myself up to you.
So what we saw in that movie, The Help, it has a legacy.
Right.
Has a
Well, that's all a part of that. But I think too, us just maintaining parts of ourselves, like in some places, even amongst the Gullah Geechee people, they might have a part of the culture they show the oppressor, but then they maintain themselves when they were by themselves. And so just having different ways of maintaining relationship, different ways that you're going to socialize your children, things of that nature. I think we resisted just trying to maintain our sanity. And I think we still do some of those things today.
Right.
And so resistance took a lot of ways. Now, I will mention this. You mentioned there weren't any sit-ins. We know that, particularly in the North, black people did petitions and appeals and things of that nature, trying to do things within the constitutional framework of the oppressors.
So there's always been diverse strategies.
It's been diverse strategies.
There have been petitions,
Exactly.
there have been protests. This resistance movement has
Just appealing to someone's humanity. Even when they're inhumane, but
even great speeches sometimes.
Right, exactly.
Great orators that we find that make a moral appeal. There's all kinds of different strategies that black people have used in this resistance.
Think about the Amistad case, and Sinkyu, even in his own language, made an appeal to the court and to let his people, free.
Want free.
Let us go back home. So we've always been diverse. I agree with that assessment. It hasn't been one way to do things. I think, unfortunately, a lot of historians, a lot of folks in the media, and us in general, we might, and that's why these books you mentioned, they present a different narrative of the civil rights movement that we generally are taught. That's generally, when I say taught, not just in schools, but through mass media or whatever.
Right.
There's one narrative of the struggle, and not looking at the diverse ways, particularly in local communities, that people have fought and resisted in order to win our human rights,
Right.
maintain our integrity and our dignity as people.
Right. One of the stories that we get about Dr. King is early in his history as an activist and as an organizer is when he was in Montgomery, Alabama. Dr. King was at home in the church parsonage of Dexter Avenue Baptist Church, now Dexter Avenue King Memorial Baptist Church. But Bayard Rustin, and there's been a recent film about him in the last year, came to visit him. And we see this story told in a number of different film depictions of Dr. King's life. But Bayard Rustin, who was from the North and a disciple of nonviolence, someone who believed philosophically and ethically.
He's one of the pioneers.
As a pioneer of nonviolence, came to Montgomery, Alabama. Came to visit with Dr. King, and the reports say that he was stunned to find that there were men outside of the home of Dr. King who were armed, who were protecting him from the violence that occurred. We know that Dr. King's home, the parsonage, had been bombed. There were guns inside the home. There's a story about somebody about to sit down on a couch, and they said don't sit down because there was a weapon underneath the pillow or on the pillow of the couch. And the Dr. King, but then we talk about that as if that was just early in Dr. King's growth. He was still a very young man in his 20s in that time period, and he grew out of that. But before this part of our podcast episode, we showed a reenactment of one of the stories that occurred in Greensboro, Alabama in 1968, just a couple of weeks before Dr. King was assassinated. Not at the beginning of his public career, but at the end. And we find something that is very similar to what Bayard Rustin found back when he visited Dr. King in Montgomery, Alabama. And it's the story of a community. It's the story of a community that surrounded a home where Dr. King was laying his head because there were threats of violence. There were threats that he would be assassinated, and they did not want him to be killed in Greensboro, Alabama. Today we have the Black History Safe House Museum, which is the home of Teresa Burroughs, where Dr. King laid his head that night. And the community came out to protect that home, to keep him from being killed. Tell us about that legacy within the civil rights movement, because it's one thing for us to look at leaders, whether it be a Martin Luther King Jr. or a Harriet Tubman, but it's something else to look at what is a part of the resistance culture of our people within this. And now let's focus on the civil rights movement. Like in the civil rights movement, is this a bizarre aberration to think that there were actually black people who were prepared to protect Dr. King? Or is this something that we should understand differently as a part of the untold story, the untold authentic history of the civil rights movement?
I think it's a part of our culture. It's a part of who we are as a people. When we are emancipated, during the period of time we were enslaved, it was illegal for us to have weapons, right? So as a part of our freedom, one of the things people wanted to have is the ability to protect and defend themselves.
Some of the first gun control laws were created to keep African people from being able to have access to that type of resistance.
Right. So we could utilize it to free ourselves, right? And so one of the first things people wanted was the ability to protect, defend their humanity, right? And so it wasn't odd for black people to have guns in a home, and not just for hunting, but to protect themselves. When I did interview people as I was doing the research, first it was my dissertation, then my book. I remember meeting this elder sister in Macomb, Mississippi, and she said her father taught her how to shoot because they were concerned about white rapists. That wasn't uncommon.
Right.
So it was seen as a necessity in many of our communities to protect and defend ourselves. So when you talk about that, many of the figures we talk about in the movement, not just Dr. King, Fannie Lou Hamer had a gun in her home, Medgar Evers had all types of guns. In fact, some of the nonviolent activists I talked to said Medgar Evers said they were crazy because they didn't have guns. I think he kept a low profile in terms of advocating about it because People who ran the national NAACP didn't want that particular image out there of him at that particular time. But it's an important part of our culture. So Dr. King, even though he and others made the pledge of nonviolent direct action, and as you mentioned, some people it's a way of life, some people it's tactical, they just gonna do this in the context of campaign. Even Dr. King says himself, he talks about this in '68 in his article on Black Power. He's not opposed to people using armed self-defense to defend their homes and their persons. He didn't believe they should be involved in demonstrations,
Right.
because in demonstrations, I think there's something I talk about. There's a difference in tactical nonviolence and philosophical nonviolence. Of course, Dr. King was both. He believed in that as a way of life, and he championed that because he felt there needed to be some form of reconciliation. And if I kill your brother, then it's going to be hard to reconcile at some point. He also believed that, and if we have guns present at demonstrations, we're not going to get support from aspects of our society, of the society, I should say, not our society, but from the president, from the Democratic Party, from Northern liberals, that they're not going to be as willing to support a movement if they see particularly black men with guns, which we know scares white people.
So Dr. King was thoughtful. He was strategic,
right?
And again, in Greensboro, the way the story is told and is captured in terms of the history from those who were there is that they were committed to Dr. King. Dr. King was in Greensboro. He was scheduled to speak. He couldn't get out of town. The Klan was looking for him and coming to kill him. They told Dr. King, you just go to sleep. you go and lay down.
Right.
It's not safe for you to leave.
Right.
We don't know if he was asking questions and what's going on here. I think Dr. King said, all right.
No.
Handle that.
There's other situations that shows, Dr. King, for instance, prior to that incident, when you have the March Against Fear, where you have during the March Against Fear this debate around armed self-defense, nonviolence.
What year was that?
This is 1966, when after James Meredith attempts to do the one-man march and is shot
Meredith,
damn near right when he gets past the Mississippi border,
right?
And so King and Snick and Kwame Ture, Stokely Carmichael at that time, and Core, they all come together, and they're going to want to continue this march because they feel it would be a great defeat for our movement if people are intimidated after seeing what happened to James Meredith. So they continue to march. There's a point in the march where they're approaching the anniversary of the three men being taken or kidnapped and murdered in Philadelphia, Mississippi. So Dr. King was asked to come there ahead of the march. And then he was also called to leave to go back to do a funeral. He would only do it if he had the protection of the Deacons for Defense. So it was like he's willing to accept protection at particular points. You don't have the federal government there to protect him at that point. You don't. That there's a period of the time of the march where the Mississippi state troopers were providing security, but they got so mad at the rhetoric from the demonstrations, the speech just coming from the demonstration, the protests, the verbal stuff, that they said they're not going to protect them any longer. So it's the Deacons for Defense who provided protection for Martin Luther King to go back and forth.
So tell us a little bit about the Deacons for Defense.
The Deacons for Defense were a group that started in Louisiana, 1964, and it was in a place called Jonesboro, Louisiana, northern Louisiana, where at a certain point, particularly after you have increased activity from the Congress of Racial Equality to register people to vote, that there's increased Klan activity in Jonesboro. And when we say increased activity, they would take parades in the black community to intimidate black folks. So some point, 14 black people got together, 12 men, two women. And most of the men were either World War II or Korean War vets. They inventoried what guns were available in the black community, what ammunition was available, and they decided they were going to start patrolling the black community. That became an example for other communities in Louisiana and Mississippi. And they even provided some support in Lowndes County during the campaign in Lowndes County. So the Deacons for Defense were a paramilitary organization, a black militia. They had their own rules. They had formed like a secret society, really, because they would only identify certain members. Everybody wouldn't say they in the Deacons for Defense, and they would only recruit people they knew. You know what I mean? You couldn't. They wasn't open recruitment. They would say, okay, I played football with Nakata. I could trust him. I went to church. We were on the deacon board together. You know, we were Masons together. So it was more like you put in people you could trust, and you knew that they would shoot when it was necessary, or they wouldn't shoot.
Right.
So they were
When it was
disciplined.
unnecessary.
When it was unnecessary,
Right.
yeah, they wouldn't be wild about it, and they wouldn't snitch on each other.
Right.
They had a code. So Martin Luther King did trust them to provide him security. So yeah, Dr. King I'm sure in the situation in Greensboro that he would have taken a posture. Okay, we got to. If I want to live, if I want to make it home to see Coretta, I got to depend on these brothers. You know, and he would wanted that for himself or anybody else. And like I said, his posture was, we don't need to have this in demonstrations.
Right.
But in terms of us maintaining our families, our homes, our lives, then yes, why not have self-defense?
Those who were a part of the freedom rides, those who were a part of the sit-in movement, who committed to the principles of nonviolent resistance, who said that they were willing to take abuse and even risk their lives in order to protest and to fight for freedom, are very real dimensions of our movement. But that wasn't everyone.
Right.
Everyone wasn't committed to that in the same way. And I mean, the reality is most people didn't do anything. So the first thing we even say, well, everybody wasn't nonviolent. Well, let's be clear. The mass majority of people, most deacons weren't defending anything. That's the reality is.
That's a good quote.
And most churches, most people did not march with King.
Right.
We're not involved in the freedom movement on any level.
Right. We do need to learn from this legacy, and we need to, in our communities, it's not going to be a small group that's going to defend and protect us. We all had to have that responsibility, right? And so
to have a culture of resistance.
So yeah, and so we need to think about that in our churches,
protection,
in our community organizations, in our neighborhoods. We need to begin to have this consciousness and begin to organize to make our communities safer.
Right. Well, but I think that's so important what you lift up. I mean, when we have, whether it be younger people or very young people who say, we are not our ancestors, or I am not my ancestors. I mean, I think the first thing that we need to say is, one, you don't understand your ancestors in all of their beautiful complexity and diversity. Black people, our ancestors, have used many different strategies to resist, to remain free, to remain protected, to advance forward. There has been nonviolent resistance, and again, Dr. King pointed out that nonviolent resistance is not passive.
Right. No doubt.
It is a direct action strategy, and there were some who were nonviolent in terms of their resistance, whether it be as a way of life, whether it be as a strategy, whether it be as a tactic. There were some that believed in self-defense. There were some that used both at different times in different places. There is a long legacy. So the first thing when you say, I am not my ancestors, you can say, well, one, you don't know their ancestors well enough to say that.
Right.
And so let's explore the legacy of Robert and Mabel Williams and the Deacons for Defense, whether that be in the Carolinas, whether that be in Louisiana, whether that be in Mississippi. Let's study what our ancestors did in Mississippi, whether that be Skip
Robinson,
whether it be Medgar Evers, whether it be Charles Evers. Call the names. Do we know our ancestors well enough?
Right.
Or are we being offensive ourselves?
Right.
When we speak out of our ignorance, not knowing the true story. But also, and this is the book, and I really like Charles Cobb's book in terms of the cover, because you have a woman on the front with her gun.
Right.
This nonviolent stuff will get you killed. How guns made the civil rights movement possible. But if we say I am not my ancestors, well, maybe you need to be.
Right.
Maybe we need to be.
Right.
Because if we look at some of what we have and some of what we've lost, then we can see some of the ways that we're not ready for today.
The work you're doing is kind of helping us really understand and explore our identity and what our potential is. You know, sometimes I think having a limited narrative gives us a limited idea of who we are as a people. And so I just want to thank you and producers of this program for helping to bring that light to our folks. Keep on keeping on. I'm gonna try to do my part too.
Thank you, thank you, brother, for your legacy, for your commitment, for your scholarship.
We have a rich, robust, and complicated legacy in our struggle for freedom. In this season of remembrance, as we lift up the legacy of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., let us remember that Dr. King existed within the context of a community, within the context of a movement, within the context of a people that were striving and struggling for freedom, oftentimes in their own ways, oftentimes in contradiction to what others may have embraced or supported, but all committed to remaining stayed on freedom. Until next time.
Singing and praying with my mind.